My son said, "You have no meaning in this house anymore." I kept silent. Then I am Mark, 62 years old, a retired mechanical engineer after 35 years at the local auto plant. My whole life was dedicated to providing for my family, my wife Sarah, and our son Derek. I never expected much in return, just respect and love. But things changed after Sarah passed. I will never forget the day Derek looked me in the eyes and said, "You have no meaning in this house anymore." I kept silent that day, but what I did next changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button. You will want to hear how a father reclaimed his dignity after years of disrespect. My story begins with what I thought was the American dream. For 40 years, Sarah and I built a life together centered around our home in a working-class neighborhood in Michigan. We were not rich by any means, but we were happy. Sarah worked part-time as a school secretary, while I put in long hours at the auto manufacturing plant. The work was physically demanding, hands always stained with grease, back always aching, but it paid enough to keep us comfortable. Our greatest joy was our son Derek. From the moment he was born, I knew I wanted to give him opportunities I never had. My own father had been a factory worker too, and while he provided for us, he never had the chance to pursue education beyond high school. I was determined that Derek would have that chance. As a boy, Derek was my shadow. I can still picture him at 6 years old, his small hands trying to grip the fishing rod as we sat by the lake on Sunday mornings. I taught him how to bait a hook, how to wait patiently for the fish to bite, and how to respect nature by only taking what we needed. Those quiet mornings by the water were sacred to us, just father and son, talking about life while the sun rose over the trees. When Derek was 10, I started teaching him about cars. Our weekend ritual became working together on my old Ford pickup in the garage. "Hand me that wrench, son," I would say, and he would eagerly search through the toolbox. I showed him how to change oil, replace spark plugs, and diagnose engine problems by their sounds. "If you understand how things work," I told him, "you will never be at anyone else's mercy." He would nod seriously, absorbing every word like it was gospel. Through high school, Derek maintained good grades. He was smart, smarter than I ever was, and Sarah and I were so proud when he was accepted to the state university to study business. It was not an Ivy League school, but it was a giant step for our family. No Walters had ever attended college before. Paying for Derek's education was not easy. I took extra shifts whenever possible, sometimes working 16 hours straight. Sarah and I cut back on everything from new clothes to eating out. Our old sofa had stuffing coming out of the seams, but we did not care. Derek's tuition bills were paid on time, and that was what mattered. "You do not need to work so hard, Dad," Derek would say when he came home for holidays and saw the exhaustion in my eyes. But I would just smile and say, "Education is an investment, son, the most important one I will ever make." When Derek graduated with his business degree standing in his cap and gown, I felt a pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. He had done it. He had broken the cycle of blue-collar work that had defined the men in our family for generations. With that diploma in hand, he could enter a world I had only glimpsed from the outside. Derek's first job was at a marketing firm in Chicago, entry-level but with potential for growth. Sarah and I helped him move into a small apartment with 2 roommates. As we unpacked his things, I noticed how he seemed different, more confident speaking with new vocabulary and referencing people and concepts unfamiliar to me. It was what we wanted, of course, for him to expand his horizons, but I would be lying if I said I did not feel a small pang as I realized he was entering a world where I could not follow. For the first few years of his career, Derek would call regularly. He would tell us about his promotions, his new friends, the restaurants and bars they frequented. Sarah and I would listen eagerly, living vicariously through his experiences. When he came home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, he would bring expensive wines or gourmet cheeses, things we would never buy for ourselves. Everything changed when Derek met Jessica. They were introduced at a charity gala, the kind of event I would feel uncomfortable attending. Jessica came from a wealthy family, her father a successful surgeon, her mother a former model, who now ran a high-end boutique. When Derek first brought her to meet us, I saw the way her eyes took in our modest home, the slightly worn furniture, the simple decor Sarah had so carefully arranged. "Your home is quaint," she said, and I felt Sarah stiffen beside me. But we smiled and served the pot roast Sarah had spent all day preparing, even as Jessica picked at it and mentioned her new diet that restricted red meat. After Derek and Jessica got engaged, his visits became less frequent. When they did come, Derek seemed increasingly uncomfortable, rushing through meals and making excuses to leave early. I noticed how he would wince when I used incorrect grammar or mentioned my work at the plant. Once, when I was telling a story about a machine malfunction that had nearly caused an accident, Jessica exchanged a look with Derek that clearly said, "How boring." I began to feel like a relic in my own son's life, a reminder of where he came from, but not someone who belonged in where he was going. Still, Sarah and I attended their wedding held at a vineyard that cost more than our entire house. I wore a rented tuxedo and gave a brief toast carefully written and rehearsed, so I would not embarrass Derek with my working-class speech patterns. To my son and his beautiful bride, I said, raising my champagne glass, "May your life together be filled with as much love and joy as Sarah and I have shared." I saw Derek's relief when I finished quickly and sat down without sharing any childhood stories or dad jokes. After the wedding, Derek and Jessica bought a large house in the suburbs of Chicago. We visited once, shortly after they moved in. The house was immaculate, with white carpets and modern furniture that looked more for display than comfort. I felt nervous sitting on their pristine sofa, afraid to leave a mark. When Jessica showed us their wine cellar stocked with bottles that cost more than my weekly salary, I did not know what to say except, "That sure is something." Despite the growing distance, Sarah and I continued to send birthday and Christmas cards with personal notes. We saved up to buy them thoughtful gifts, though Jessica would often subtly indicate they were not to her taste. We kept photos of them on our mantle and bragged about Derek's career advancement to our friends and neighbors. Our son is an account executive now. I would tell my buddies at the plant, not fully understanding what the title meant, but proud nonetheless. He is really making something of himself. For a while, we maintained a delicate balance. Derek and Jessica lived their life, we lived ours, and we connected during major holidays with increasingly strained conversation. Then Sarah got sick, and everything fell apart. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garage tinkering with the lawnmower when Sarah called out from the back door. Her voice sounded different, tight with emotion. "Mark, can you come inside? I need to talk to you." I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "The doctor called," she said, and those 3 words changed our lives forever. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. It had already spread to her liver. The prognosis was not good. For the next 18 months, our lives revolved around hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and managing Sarah's increasing pain. I took early retirement to care for her full-time. The medical bills piled up despite our insurance. We depleted our savings, then took out a second mortgage on the house. None of it mattered as long as Sarah got the best care possible. Derek visited occasionally, always alone, explaining that Jessica was too busy with work or social obligations. His visits were brief, awkward, as if he did not know what to say to his dying mother. Once, when Sarah was having a good day, she asked him about the possibility of grandchildren. Derek shifted uncomfortably, and said they were focusing on their careers for now. The disappointment in Sarah's eyes broke my heart. When Sarah died on a quiet Sunday morning, with me holding her hand, something inside me died too. For 40 years, she had been my partner, my best friend, my compass. Without her, I felt adrift in a world that suddenly seemed too large and empty. The funeral was small but dignified. Derek flew in the night before and stayed at a hotel rather than in his childhood home. Jessica came with him to the service but spent most of the time on her phone. When I broke down during my eulogy, choking on words of love for my Sarah, I noticed Jessica checking her watch. After the funeral, Derek sat me down at the kitchen table where just months before Sarah and I had received her diagnosis. "Dad," he said carefully, "Jessica and I have been talking. With Mom gone and these medical bills, it does not make sense for you to keep this house. It is too big for one person anyway." I looked around at the home Sarah and I had built together, every corner filled with memories. The wallpaper in the kitchen that we had put up together, laughing as we got paste in each other's hair. The slight dent in the doorframe where we had marked Derek's height every year. The garden visible through the window where Sarah's roses were still blooming despite her absence. "Where would I go?" I asked, my voice small. "You could come live with us," Derek said, though I caught the reluctance in his tone. "We have that spare room in the basement. It would need some fixing up, but it could work temporarily until we figure out something more permanent." Temporarily. The word hung in the air between us. But what choice did I have? The medical bills had depleted my savings, and my pension would barely cover basic expenses, let alone a mortgage. So I agreed. 2 months later, after selling the house and most of our furniture, I moved into Derek and Jessica's basement. They called it a guest suite, but it was clearly an afterthought in their grand home with a small bathroom and no windows. I brought only what would fit in the space: a few clothes, family photos, and Sarah's wedding ring, which I kept in my wallet. "You will always have a place with us, Dad," Derek had promised when he first suggested the arrangement. But from day one, I felt like an intruder in their perfectly curated life. Breakfast was the worst. I would come upstairs, careful to make as little noise as possible, to find Derek and Jessica already at the table, engrossed in their phones or tablets. "Good morning," I would say cheerfully, trying to dispel the awkwardness. "Morning," Derek would mutter without looking up. Jessica would sometimes not respond at all. I tried to be useful around the house. One Saturday, I noticed the kitchen faucet was leaking. "I can fix that for you," I offered, already mentally going through the tools I would need. "No need," Jessica said quickly. "We have a plumber on call. The last thing we need is for something to go wrong and flood the kitchen." The implied criticism stung. I had been fixing things around our home for decades without incident. But I nodded and retreated back to my basement room. As weeks turned into months, the subtle exclusions became more obvious. Derek and Jessica would have friends over for dinner parties, but never invite me to join. "It is just work colleagues, Dad," Derek would explain. "You would be bored." I would hear laughter and conversation above me as I sat alone in my room watching old westerns on the small TV they had provided. When their friends did see me, they would speak loudly and slowly, as if age had affected my hearing or intelligence. "And how are you enjoying your retirement, Mark?" They would practically shout before quickly turning back to their sophisticated conversations about investments and vacation properties. I began eating my meals at odd hours to avoid interactions. I would wait until Derek and Jessica left for work, then make myself a simple breakfast. For dinner, I would often claim I had already eaten when they ordered expensive takeout that they did not offer to share. My attempts to connect with my granddaughter Emily were the most painful. She was 4 when I moved in, a bright, curious child with Sarah's gentle eyes. At first she was shy around me, this grandfather she had rarely seen. But children are adaptable, and soon she would knock on my door wanting to show me her drawings or her collection of stuffed animals. These moments were precious to me. I would sit on the floor with her, despite my arthritic knees, and build block towers or read her stories. For those brief times I felt useful again, connected to the family I had sacrificed so much for. But one day, after I had spent an hour teaching Emily how to fold paper airplanes, Jessica came in looking displeased. "Emily, it is time for your enrichment class," she said, taking the child's hand. Then to me, "Please do not fill her head with such trivial activities. We are paying good money for her educational development." After that, my time with Emily was increasingly restricted. "She needs to focus on her structured activities," Derek would explain when I asked if she could visit. "The preschool admissions in this area are very competitive." As my world shrank to the confines of my basement room, I found myself thinking more and more about Sarah. What would she make of our son now? The boy we had raised to value family above all else had become a man who seemed embarrassed by his own father. The breaking point came gradually, but it was no less devastating for its slow approach. One afternoon, while Derek and Jessica were at work, I decided to clean out the rain gutters. They had been overflowing during recent storms, and I had noticed water damage beginning to form on the exterior walls. Even though my offers to help were usually refused, I thought this was something simple I could do without permission, a small way to contribute to the household. I was on the ladder scooping leaves and debris when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Jessica had come home early. I raised my hand in greeting, but her expression turned from surprise to anger in an instant. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded, marching across the lawn. "Just cleaning the gutters," I replied, continuing my work. They were getting clogged. "Get down from there immediately." Her voice was sharp enough to make me pause. "We have landscapers who handle this. Do you have any idea what our insurance would say if you fell, or what the neighbors must think seeing an old man on a ladder?" Old man. The words hit me like a physical blow. Is that all I was to them now? A liability, an embarrassment. I climbed down slowly, my hands shaking slightly, not from age, but from humiliation. Jessica was already on her phone, presumably calling the landscapers to come finish what I had started. I put the ladder away and retreated to my room without another word. That evening at dinner, Jessica recounted the incident to Derek as if I had been caught vandalizing the property rather than trying to maintain it. "Your father could have broken his neck or damaged the gutters," she said, speaking about me as if I was not sitting right there at the table. "We need to be clearer about boundaries." Derek nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Dad, we appreciate that you want to help, but some things are better left to professionals. We can afford to pay people for these services." I pushed my food around my plate, appetite gone. "I have been taking care of houses since before you were born, son," I said quietly. "Never had a serious accident or did substandard work." "That was different," Derek replied, his tone suggesting he was explaining something to a child. "This house has specialized materials that require expert handling. The gutter system alone cost more than your old car." I set my fork down. "I see. Well, thank you for clarifying my place in your home." The tension at the table was palpable. Emily, bless her heart, tried to change the subject. "Grandpa, can you tell me a story after dinner?" Before I could answer, Jessica cut in. "Not tonight, Emily. You have piano practice, and then we need to review your vocabulary cards." She shot me a look that clearly said this was not up for discussion. After dinner, I helped clear the table, a task I was still permitted to do under supervision. As I was rinsing dishes before placing them in the dishwasher, Jessica approached. Mark, she said in a low voice, Derek and I have been talking. Have you considered looking into senior communities? There is a very nice one just 20 minutes from here. They have activities people your own age to socialize with. I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. Are you asking me to leave? Not immediately, she said, quickly glancing toward Derek, who was conveniently occupied with his phone in the other room. But long-term, it might be better for everyone. You would have more freedom, more appropriate companionship. I see. I said again those two words, becoming my shield against showing how deeply her suggestion wounded me. And who would pay for this senior community? My pension barely covers my medications. Jessica's smile tightened. There are options. Government assistance, reverse mortgages on your old house equity. We can discuss it with a financial advisor. My old house, which I had sold to pay for Sarah's medical care. The house whose proceeds had mostly gone to hospitals and drug companies, with the small remainder sitting in a bank account that would not cover even a year at the kind of facility Jessica was suggesting. That night, I lay awake in my basement room, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had come to this. I had worked hard, saved carefully, raised my son with love and values. Where had I gone wrong? What had I done to deserve being treated like an unwanted burden in my golden years? The next morning, I made a rare request. Derek, could we go fishing this weekend, just you and me, like we used to? Derek looked up from his tablet with surprise. Fishing, Dad? I have not been fishing in 20 years. I know. That is why I thought it might be nice. There is a lake not far from here. We could rent equipment. He seemed genuinely conflicted for a moment, and I saw a flash of the boy he had once been. Then his phone buzzed, and the moment passed. I cannot this weekend. I have a golf game with clients on Saturday, and Jessica's parents are coming for brunch Sunday. Maybe another time then, I said, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. Yeah, maybe, he replied, already absorbed in whatever message had come through on his phone. But I knew there would not be another time. Just as I knew with growing certainty that I could not continue living as a ghost in my son's house, tolerated, but not welcomed, present, but not seen. The final straw came on Emily's birthday. I had spent weeks working on a special gift for her, a handcrafted wooden dollhouse similar to one I had made for a neighbor's daughter years ago. I worked on it in secret, using basic tools I had brought with me, and purchasing supplies little by little from my pension money. The dollhouse featured detailed miniature furniture I had carved myself. Tiny curtains made from Sarah's old handkerchiefs, even working lights powered by a small battery. On the morning of Emily's party, I brought the dollhouse upstairs, covered with a sheet. I have something for the birthday girl, I announced, feeling proud of what I had created. Jessica's eyes narrowed when she saw the bulky present. What is that? Just a little something I made for Emily, I said, setting it on the table and removing the sheet with a flourish. Emily's eyes widened with delight. A dollhouse for me. She ran forward, examining the tiny rooms with wonder. Look, Mommy, the lights work. For a moment, I felt a surge of joy seeing her reaction. This was what I had been missing, the simple pleasure of making a child happy, of creating something with my own hands that brought delight. But Jessica quickly stepped between Emily and the dollhouse. That is very interesting, Mark. But we already have Emily's presents organized. She turned to her daughter. Remember the American Girl dollhouse we ordered, the one that matches your bedroom decor? This is nice, but it might have splinters or lead paint. It does not have either, I said, my voice tight. I used child-safe materials. Still, Jessica insisted, we cannot be too careful. Why do not you put this back downstairs for now, and we can discuss it later? Emily's lower lip trembled. But I want Grandpa's house. It has tiny lights. Emily. Jessica's voice took on a warning tone. Go get dressed for your party. Your friends will be here soon. As Emily reluctantly left the room, Jessica turned to me. I appreciate the thought, Mark, but we have a gift theme for the party. Everything is coordinated in pink and white with an educational focus. This does not really fit. It is a gift from her grandfather, I said, struggling to keep my composure. Does it need to match your color scheme? Derek entered the room, then taking in the situation with a glance. What is going on? Your father made a dollhouse, Jessica said, in the same tone one might say, your father brought home a dead animal. I was explaining that we already have Emily's presents planned. Derek examined the dollhouse briefly. It is rustic, Dad. But Jessica is right. We have already got Emily's gifts sorted. And honestly, it does not really match the aesthetic we are trying to teach her. Aesthetic, I repeated incredulous. She is 5 years old. She just wants something to play with. We are raising her with an appreciation for design and quality, Jessica said primly. We want her surroundings to be cohesive and tasteful. I looked from Jessica to Derek, searching for any sign that they heard how ridiculous they sounded. When Derek was young, he did not care if his toys matched. He just wanted to play. That was different, Derek said dismissively. We grew up without many options. Emily has advantages, and we want to make sure she appreciates them. By teaching her to reject handmade gifts from family, I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Do not be dramatic, Dad. Derek sighed. It is just not appropriate for the party. The other parents might get the wrong idea. What wrong idea? That her grandfather cares about her, that not everything worthwhile comes from a store. Jessica stepped closer to Derek, physically aligning herself with him against me. I think your father is getting overly emotional about this. Perhaps he should sit the party out if he cannot maintain composure. I stared at my son, willing him to stand up for me to recognize the hurt they were causing. Instead, he nodded agreement with his wife. Maybe that would be best, Dad. You can join us for cake later if you are feeling more reasonable. Something snapped inside me then. Decades of swallowed pride, of putting family first, of accepting Derek's gradual rejection, all came crashing down in that moment. Reasonable. You want to talk about reasonable? Is it reasonable to treat your father like an unwelcome guest? Is it reasonable to dismiss every attempt I make to be part of this family? Is it reasonable to teach your daughter that appearances matter more than heart? Derek's face hardened. That is enough, Dad. You are making a scene over a simple matter of party planning. It is not about the party, I shot back. It is about respect. It is about acknowledging that I am still a person with feelings and skills and love to give, not just an inconvenient old man you are stuck with. No one said that, Derek began, but I cut him off. You do not have to say it. You show it every day in 1,000 small ways. The way you talk over me, the way you exclude me from family activities, the way you correct me in front of others. Jessica made a show of checking her watch. The guests will be arriving in an hour. We do not have time for this drama. I looked at her coldly. Of course. Heaven forbid anything disrupt your perfectly orchestrated life. God knows having your husband's father living in your basement must be such a burden on your social status. Dad, Derek's voice was sharp. That is completely out of line. Jessica has been more than generous allowing you to stay here. Allowing me, I repeated. Is that how you see it? As charity after everything I sacrificed for you. The extra shifts I worked to put you through college, the retirement savings that went to your mother's medical bills, the house we sold because you promised I would always have a place with you. Derek's face flushed with anger. That is not fair. We have provided everything you need. Except basic dignity, I replied, my voice breaking slightly. Except the respect a son should show his father. Respect? Derek laughed bitterly. You want respect for what? For being stuck in the past, for refusing to adapt to our lifestyle, for embarrassing me in front of my colleagues with your outdated views and working-class mannerisms. His words hit like physical blows. I took a step back, genuinely shocked by the contempt in his voice. Derek, Jessica said, warningly, glancing toward the hallway where Emily might overhear. But Derek was too far gone. Years of suppressed resentment poured out of him. You have no idea the position you put me in. My friends wonder why I have my father living in my basement instead of in a proper facility. My in-laws question why I do not provide better for you. Do you know how that makes me look? How it makes you look, I repeated softly. That is what concerns you. Not how it feels to be treated like a burden by my only child. Oh, spare me the guilt trip, Derek snapped. You made your choices in life and I have made mine. I have worked hard to rise above where I came from, to provide a better life for my family than you provided for yours. I felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. A better life, your mother and I gave you everything we could. We loved you unconditionally. We taught you to value family and hard work and integrity. What values are you teaching Emily? That appearances matter more than kindness. That family is disposable when they become inconvenient. Derek's face contorted with rage. You know what, Dad? You have no meaning in this house anymore. We would be better off without you. The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. Jessica looked almost shocked at the baldness of the statement, though I knew she agreed with the sentiment. I stood perfectly still, absorbing the full weight of my son's rejection. Then, without another word, I picked up the dollhouse I had crafted with such care and carried it back downstairs to my room. I heard Derek and Jessica whispering urgently behind me, but I did not look back. In my room, I placed the dollhouse on my small table and sat heavily on the bed. The pain in my chest was physical, as if something had broken inside me. For a few minutes, I allowed myself to feel the full force of it, the culmination of years of increasing disrespect and alienation. Then, as the sounds of arriving party guests filtered down from above, I began to think clearly for the first time in months. I could not continue like this. I would not continue like this. My life was not over, and it was time I remembered my own worth. I kept silent that day, attending the birthday party as requested, smiling mechanically and staying in the background. I watched as Emily opened the mountain of expensive, coordinated gifts, including the designer dollhouse that made my handcrafted version look quaint by comparison. I ate a small piece of professionally decorated cake and made appropriate small talk with the few parents who deigned to speak to the elderly man in the corner. But inside, I was already planning my escape. That night, after the house fell silent, I took out my old address book and found the number for my friend Frank. We had worked together at the plant for 30 years, but had fallen out of touch since Sarah's death and my move to Derek's. Frank had retired a few years before me and gone into real estate as a second career, focusing on affordable housing for seniors. I hesitated before dialing, aware of how late it was, but my need for friendly counsel outweighed concerns about etiquette. To my relief, Frank answered on the third ring, his voice gruff but welcoming. "Mark, is that really you, you old son of a gun? It has been ages." The familiar warmth in his voice nearly undid me. "Frank, sorry to call so late. I hope I did not wake Alice. She is at her sister's this weekend. Is everything okay? You sound strange." I took a deep breath. "Not really. I need some advice. and maybe some help. For the next hour, I poured out my story. Gradual erosion of my relationship with Derek, the subtle and not so subtle humiliations I had endured in his home, and finally the confrontation over Emily's dollhouse. Frank listened without interruption, occasionally making sounds of disbelief or sympathy. "Jesus, Mark," he said when I finished. "I had no idea things were so bad. Why did not you call sooner?" "Pride, I guess," I admitted, and hoped that things would improve, that Derek would remember who he was, who we were as a family. "What can I do to help?" Frank asked without hesitation, and for the first time in months I felt the comforting weight of true friendship. "I need to get out of here," I said simply. "Find my own place, something I can afford on my pension. I do not care how small it is, as long as it is mine." Frank was quiet for a moment. "Let me think. I might know of a place. It is nothing fancy, just a small apartment complex for seniors. Independent living, not assisted care. The units are basic but well maintained, and the rent is controlled." "Sounds perfect," I said, feeling a spark of hope. "There is a waiting list usually," Frank cautioned, "but I know the property manager. Let me make some calls tomorrow." "Thank you, Frank. I cannot tell you what this means to me." "Do not mention it. What are friends for? And Mark, whatever happens with the apartment, you are welcome to stay with me and Alice until you find something. Our guest room is small, but it has windows." The reference to windows, something my basement room lacked, made me smile despite everything. "I appreciate that more than you know." After hanging up, I felt energized in a way I had not in years. Instead of going to bed, I pulled out a notebook and began making plans. First, I would need to take stock of my finances. My pension was modest but reliable. There was also the small amount remaining from the sale of our house after Sarah's medical bills were paid. It was not much, but it might be enough for a security deposit and basic furnishings. Next, I needed to find work. My pension alone would cover rent at a subsidized senior apartment, but little else. Despite being officially retired, I was still capable of working. My skills as a mechanic were somewhat outdated, but surely there were places that could use an experienced pair of hands, even part-time. As I was making notes, a thought struck me. Sarah's life insurance policy. We had maintained a small policy for years, nothing extravagant, but enough to cover funeral expenses with something left over. In the chaos following her death and my move to Derek's, I had never followed up on the claim. The insurance company had sent paperwork, which I remembered filling out, but I could not recall receiving any payment. I dug through my few files until I found the policy documents. According to these, there should have been a payout of $300,000, a substantial sum enough to secure my independence for years to come. But where was it? The next morning, instead of joining Derek and Jessica for their usual strained breakfast, I waited until they left for work. Then I made a call to the insurance company. After navigating an automated system and providing various identifying information, I finally reached a human representative. "Yes, Mr. Walters. I can confirm that the policy for Sarah Walters was paid out in full on February 12th of last year. The check was sent to the address we had on file at that time." "That would have been our old house," I said, frowning. "But we had sold it by then. The mail should have been forwarded to my son's address." "Let me check the records," the representative said. After a few moments, it appears the check was cashed on February 28th. "Would you like me to send you a copy of the endorsed check?" "Yes, please," I said, a suspicion forming in my mind. "I will need to verify your identity further and send it to your address of record." "Is that still—" She read off Derek's address, which I confirmed. 2 days later, a large envelope arrived from the insurance company. Thankfully, I was the one who collected the mail that day. Inside was a copy of the check for $300,000 made out to Mark Walters' beneficiary. And there on the back was an endorsement signature. My signature, or rather a reasonable facsimile of it. I sat heavily on the steps of the house staring at the document in disbelief. Derek had intercepted the check, forged my signature, and deposited the money. My son had stolen from me his own father. That evening I searched Derek's home office while he and Jessica were at a dinner engagement. It did not take long to find what I was looking for, a file folder labeled Dad's Affairs. Inside were copies of correspondence from the insurance company bank statements, showing the deposit of the insurance money into an account I did not recognize, and most damning of all, a handwritten note from Derek to Jessica. Dad's insurance money came through. I have put it in the separate account we discussed. Given his mental state, it is better if we manage these funds for him. We can use some of it to cover his expenses here, and save the rest for when he eventually needs full-time care. My mental state. As if I was incompetent. As if I could not be trusted with my own money that was rightfully mine from a policy Sarah and I had paid into for decades. I copied the account information and replaced everything exactly as I had found it. Then I called a lawyer recommended by Frank, explaining my situation and scheduling an appointment for the following day. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Barbara Jenkins, listened to my story with growing concern. "What your son did is unambiguously illegal," she told me. "Forging your signature, diverting funds that were explicitly meant for you all, while you were still mentally competent. We have a solid case for elder financial abuse." "I do not want to sue my son," I said wearily. "I just want what is mine so I can live the rest of my life with dignity." "Sometimes the threat of legal action is enough," Barbara advised. "Let me draft a letter outlining the facts as we know them and the potential consequences. Often that is sufficient motivation for an out-of-court settlement." "How much will this cost?" I asked, concerned about legal fees. Barbara's expression softened. "Let us start with a contingency basis. If we recover your funds, I will take a percentage. If not, you will not owe me anything." She leaned forward. "Mr. Walters, what your son did was not just morally wrong, it was criminal. You deserve justice." While the legal process began, Frank came through with news about an apartment. "It is nothing special," he warned as he drove me to see it. "One-bedroom, basic amenities, first floor because of your knees. But it is clean, safe, and the complex has a good community of seniors. Plenty of activities if you want them, privacy if you do not." The apartment was indeed small, but to me it looked like paradise. Sunlight streamed through actual windows. The kitchen was tiny but functional. The bedroom could fit a double bed and a dresser. The bathroom had support bars already installed, a concession to age that I did not mind. "It is perfect," I told Frank. "How soon can I move in?" "That is the good news." Frank grinned. "The previous tenant moved to assisted living last week. It is available immediately." I pulled some strings with the manager. "She is waiving the waiting list because of your circumstances." That same day, I visited a local garage where Frank's nephew worked as a manager. Ted was a burly man in his 40s with grease-stained hands that reminded me of my younger self. Frank had called ahead explaining that I was an experienced mechanic looking for part-time work. "I cannot offer you full-time," Ted said after we talked for a while. "And the pay would not be what you were making at the plant. But we could use someone 3 days a week, especially someone who knows the older models. Most of these young mechanics are lost when anything older than 2010 comes in." "That sounds ideal," I said, relief washing over me. Between my pension and part-time work, I could support myself even without the insurance money. It would be tight, but I would be independent. Over the next week, I quietly prepared for my departure. I purchased basic necessities for the apartment, having them delivered to Frank's house. I arranged for my pension checks to be rerouted to a new bank account Ted had helped me set up. I gathered the few possessions that mattered to me, things that could fit in 2 suitcases. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Emily without actually saying goodbye. One afternoon, while Jessica was on a phone call and Derek was at work, Emily came to my room, as she sometimes did, curious about what her grandfather was doing. "I have something for you," I told her, taking out the dollhouse I had made. "This is yours whenever you want to play with it." Her eyes lit up. "Really, Mommy said I could not have it." "Well, sometimes mommies change their minds," I said, knowing it was not strictly true. "But this is between you and me for now. Okay? Our special secret." She nodded solemnly, running her small fingers over the tiny furniture. "I love it, Grandpa. It is the best present ever." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I am glad you like it, sweetheart. You know your Grandma Sarah would have loved to see you play with it. She always wanted a granddaughter." "Tell me about Grandma," Emily said, settling on the floor with the dollhouse. It was a request she had made before, one of the few ways we connected. So I told her stories about Sarah, about her kindness and strength, about how she could grow the most beautiful roses and bake the best apple pie in the county. I told her how Sarah had loved to sing while she worked, and how she had kept every drawing Derek had ever made in a special box. I did not tell her that I might not be there the next time she came looking for stories. That farewell would have to wait. The day I planned to leave, I waited until Derek and Jessica had gone to work and Emily to school. I had already moved my essential belongings to the new apartment in small batches using Frank's help. All that remained were my 2 suitcases and a letter I had written to Derek. Before leaving, I took one last walk through the house, not out of nostalgia for a place where I had never been happy, but to say a private goodbye to the last connection to my son. In the living room, I paused before a family photo from Emily's birth, the last time I remembered Derek looking at me with genuine warmth. "I tried, son," I whispered to the image. "I really tried." I placed my letter on the kitchen counter where Derek would be sure to see it when he came home. It was not accusatory or angry despite everything. I simply explained that I had found my own place and would be living independently from now on. I mentioned that I was aware of the insurance money, but chose not to elaborate, trusting that Barbara's legal letter, which would arrive the following day, would make the situation clear enough. I ended the letter with, "I will always be your father, and my door will always be open to you. I hope someday you will remember the values your mother and I tried to instill in you. Until then, I wish you and your family well." As I closed the front door behind me for the last time, I felt no sadness, only a profound sense of relief. Frank was waiting in his car at the curb, ready to drive me to my new life. "Ready?" he asked as I loaded my suitcases into his trunk. "More than ready," I replied, not looking back as we pulled away. My new apartment quickly became a home. It was small, yes, but every inch of it was mine, arranged according to my preferences, not subject to Jessica's scrutiny or Derek's disapproval. I hung photos of Sarah on the walls, placed my few books on shelves Frank helped me install, and even splurged on a comfortable recliner where I could watch baseball games without worrying about making too much noise. The part-time job at Ted's garage brought more than just supplemental income. It gave me purpose, a reason to get up each morning, and the satisfaction of using skills I had honed over decades. The younger mechanics initially regarded me with skepticism, this old guy in their domain, but attitudes changed quickly the first time I diagnosed a tricky electrical problem in a 1989 Chevrolet that had stumped everyone else. "How did you know it was the alternator diode?" one young mechanic asked in amazement. "Experience," I told him with a smile. "And a good ear. Engines talk to you if you know how to listen." Soon, I was not just fixing cars, but mentoring the younger staff, sharing knowledge that had been passed down to me, and that I had refined through years of hands-on experience. Ted began specifically assigning me the most challenging vintage vehicles, and customers started requesting the older gentleman for their classic cars. Meanwhile, my absence did not go unnoticed at Derek's house. The day after I left, he called my cell phone repeatedly. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for that conversation yet. His messages evolved from confused, "Dad, where are you?" "Did someone pick you up?" to concerned, "Dad, please call me back, we are worried," to angry, "This is completely irresponsible. You cannot just disappear without telling anyone." Barbara's legal letter arrived as scheduled, laying out in precise terms what Derek had done and the potential consequences, including criminal charges for forgery and elder financial abuse. She proposed a simple resolution: transfer the insurance money with accrued interest to an account in my name within 10 business days, and no further legal action would be pursued. 2 days later, Derek found my new apartment. Frank had warned me this might happen, as Derek still had access to my phone records and could trace Frank's number. When the buzzer rang and I heard my son's voice through the intercom, I took a deep breath before pressing the button to let him in. Derek burst into my apartment like a storm, his face flushed with a mixture of relief and indignation. "What the hell, Dad? You just disappeared. Do you have any idea how worried we have been?" I gestured for him to sit down, maintaining a calm I did not entirely feel. I left a note explaining that I had found my own place. "I am sure you got it." "A note," he sputtered. "After all we have done for you, and now this ridiculous legal threat about money that is being held for your own good." "Money that belongs to me," I corrected gently. "From your mother's life insurance, which we paid into for years specifically, so the survivor would be provided for." "You are in no condition to manage that kind of money," Derek insisted, pacing my small living room. "Look at this place. This is exactly why we were trying to protect you from impulsive decisions like this." I regarded my son steadily. "Derek, I am 62, not 92. I am of sound mind, as any doctor would confirm. I have found housing I can afford and work I enjoy. I have friends and community. What exactly are you protecting me from independence dignity?" "This is not about dignity," he snapped. "This is about you turning your back on family, on me and Jessica and Emily." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "Or is it about the money? $300,000 is a lot to give up, even for someone as successful as you claim to be." Derek's face reddened further. "That is not fair. We were going to use that money for your care. Without consulting me, without even telling me it existed." I shook my head sadly. "What happened to you, son, the boy I raised, would never have stolen from his father." "I did not steal anything," he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. "I was safeguarding it. By forging my signature, by hiding statements from me, Derek. What you did was not just morally wrong, it was illegal." He collapsed onto my sofa, suddenly looking deflated. "We needed the money," he admitted quietly. "The house, Jessica's shopping habits, Emily's private school. We are leveraged to the hilt. The insurance money was a lifeline." The admission stunned me. With their dual incomes and expensive lifestyle, I had assumed Derek and Jessica were financially secure. "You are having money troubles. Why did not you say something?" Derek laughed bitterly. "Say something to who Jessica would die before admitting to her friends or family that we are struggling. And you always made it clear you thought our lifestyle was wasteful." "I never said that," I protested. "You did not have to. It was in every disapproving look when Jessica bought something expensive, every comment about how things were different in your day." I sighed, recognizing there was some truth to his words. I had never fully understood or approved of their consumption-focused lifestyle. Even so, taking money that was meant for me without my knowledge or consent was wrong. You must see that. Derek was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? Press charges, send your own son to jail? Of course not, I said firmly. But I do expect the money to be returned as my lawyer outlined. It is not just about the money itself, Derek. It is about respect, about acknowledging that I am still capable of making my own decisions. And if I cannot pay it back right away, if we need time, then we can work out a payment plan, I said reasonably. But I need to know that you understand what you did was wrong and that it will not happen again. Derek looked around my small apartment, taking in the modest furnishings, the photos of Sarah, the view of the parking lot through my prized windows. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame cross his face. I really messed up, did not I? Yes, I said simply. You did. I do not know how to fix this, he admitted, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the uncertain boy who used to come to me with his problems looking for guidance. Start by doing the right thing, I advised. Return the money or as much as you can now, and maybe try to remember who you were before status and appearances became so important. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Emily standing there, with Jessica hovering awkwardly in the hallway. "Grandpa," Emily cried, throwing herself into my arms. "I missed you. Why did you go away?" Over her head, I met Jessica's gaze. She looked uncomfortable but nodded slightly, giving permission for the reunion. "I needed my own place, sweetie," I explained, leading Emily into the apartment. "Sometimes grown-ups need their own space." "Like a time-out?" she asked innocently. I chuckled. Something like that. Emily spotted the dollhouse I had made for her, which now sat proudly on a small table by the window. "My dollhouse, you brought it with you." "Actually," Jessica said, stepping into the apartment, "I brought it. Emily has been asking for it since you left." She hesitated, then added, "She was very upset when she realized you were gone." The admission clearly cost Jessica some pride. I nodded acknowledgement, but did not push for more. Instead, I watched as Emily immediately began playing with the dollhouse, arranging the tiny furniture, just as she had done in my basement room. Derek moved to stand beside Jessica, both of them watching their daughter with identical expressions of uncertainty. The family dynamic had shifted, and none of us were quite sure where we stood anymore. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, breaking the awkward silence. "The kitchen is small, but it works." "That would be nice," Jessica said, surprising me with her civility. As I prepared coffee in my tiny kitchen, I could hear Emily chattering to her parents about the dollhouse, explaining each room and piece of furniture as if giving a tour of a full-sized home. "Grandpa made all of this himself," she told them proudly. "He said it is like the one he wanted to build for me when I was born, but could not because he was taking care of Grandma." I froze, coffee pot in hand. I had indeed told Emily that story, never expecting her to repeat it to her parents. It was true I had planned to build a dollhouse for my future granddaughter, while Sarah was still alive, but her illness and subsequent death had derailed those plans. When I returned with the coffee, I found Derek examining the dollhouse closely, running his fingers over the smooth edges and carefully crafted details. "This is really good work, Dad," he said quietly. "I did not really look at it before." "Thank you," I said, setting mugs on the small table. It gave me something to focus on during those months in the basement. Jessica winced slightly at the reference. "Your new place is nice," she offered, clearly struggling to find something positive to say about my modest apartment. "It suits me," I replied. And the complex has activities other people my age. I am not isolated here. An uncomfortable silence fell. Emily, oblivious to the adult tension, continued playing happily with the dollhouse. Finally, Derek cleared his throat. Dad, about the money. I will transfer what I can immediately. The rest might take some time, but you will get it all back. I promise. With interest, Jessica added unexpectedly. When Derek and I both looked at her in surprise, she shrugged. It is the right thing to do. I nodded, accepting their commitment. Thank you. And, Derek continued hesitantly, would it be okay if we brought Emily to visit sometimes? She has missed you. I would like that, I said, feeling a small warmth bloom in my chest. Very much. As they prepared to leave an hour later, Emily clung to my leg. Do you have to stay here? Grandpa can. Not you come back home with us. This is my home now, sweetheart, I explained gently. But you can visit any time your parents say it is okay, and I will have special projects for us to work on together. Promise, she asked, eyes wide. Promise. I sealed it with a pinky swear, a ritual she had taught me months ago. After they left, I sat in my new recliner, reflecting on the unexpected visit. It was not forgiveness, not yet. Too much had been said and done for instant reconciliation. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of resentment and misunderstanding that had grown between us. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. Derek and Jessica began bringing Emily to visit every other weekend. Initially, these visits were brief and somewhat forced, but gradually they relaxed into a more comfortable routine. Derek would sometimes stay for a cup of coffee and conversation, while Jessica ran errands. Occasionally, all four of us would go out for a simple lunch at the diner down the street. The insurance money was returned in installments as promised. With each payment came a tacit acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a step toward rebuilding trust. My life developed its own satisfying rhythm. Mornings at the garage 3 days a week, afternoons spent on small projects in my apartment, or socializing with neighbors in the complex's community room. I joined a group of fellow retirees who met weekly for coffee and conversation, finding friendship with people who understood the challenges and joys of this stage of life. One Saturday, Derek arrived without Jessica or Emily. I thought maybe we could go fishing, he said tentatively. If you are still interested. We spent that day at a small lake outside the city, not talking much, just sharing the peaceful activity that had once been our special bond. As Derek baited his own hook with the same technique I had taught him 30 years earlier, I felt a surge of hope for our future relationship, different than before, but perhaps in time just as meaningful. That was 3 years ago. Today, at 65, I live a life I could never have imagined when I was trapped in Derek's basement. My apartment is still small, but it is filled with evidence of a rich life, photos of fishing trips with Derek, artwork Emily has made for me, even a few reluctant but increasingly genuine smiles from Jessica in family pictures. I still work part-time at the garage now, officially as the vintage vehicle specialist. The insurance money, once returned in full, was carefully invested with the help of a financial advisor Frank recommended. It provides a comfortable cushion that allows me small luxuries and the security of knowing I will not be a burden to anyone in my later years. Derek and Jessica have made changes too. They downsized to a smaller house, one they can actually afford. Derek admitted that maintaining appearances had been slowly crushing them financially and emotionally. Jessica still enjoys nice things, but she has discovered the satisfaction of living within their means. Most importantly, Emily spends time with me regularly. At 8, she is now interested in learning how things work, and I teach her the same practical skills I once taught her father. Jessica no longer objects when Emily returns home with grease under her fingernails from helping me with simple repair projects. The dollhouse remains a centerpiece in my apartment, though Emily has mostly outgrown it. Sometimes when she visits, I catch her adjusting the furniture or checking that the tiny lights still work a touchstone to the relationship we began building in secret in that basement room. I have also found purpose in unexpected ways. Through Frank, I connected with a local nonprofit that helps seniors navigate financial and legal challenges. Once a month, I speak to groups about my experience warning signs of elder financial abuse and resources for maintaining independence. My story, it turns out, is unfortunately common, though not always with such a hopeful resolution. As for my relationship with Derek, we are still healing. There are moments when old resentments flare, when a careless word or dismissive gesture brings back painful memories. But there are also new memories being formed, built on a foundation of hard-won respect rather than obligation. Last Christmas, Derek gave me a handcrafted wooden sign for my apartment door. Burned into the wood were the words, "Mark's Place, enter with respect." It hangs there now, a daily reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is not your presence in their home, but the example of living with dignity and purpose regardless of age. That is a lesson worth more than any inheritance I could leave behind. If my story resonates with you, whether you are a parent feeling pushed aside or a child struggling to respect your aging parents, remember that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity or rebuild relationships. The path forward may not be easy, but it is always worth taking. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found value in it, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve respect at any age. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up for your dignity in a relationship? What did you learn from the experience? Your story matters too.